The champagne glass I was holding suddenly slipped from my grasp. Its crystal body shattered against the marble floor, scattering pieces that looked like fallen stars. The broken shards reflected the pure horror on Emily's face. She asked me what I was doing there, her voice cutting through the elegant murmurs of the wedding guests. Her beautiful wedding gown, a dress I had paid $12,000 for, made a soft rustling sound as she took a step back from me. It was clear from her tone that my presence was not wanted. I stood paralyzed at the entrance of the grand ballroom, still clutching the gift box I had wrapped myself. Everywhere I looked, I saw white roses that had been imported from Ecuador. Their fragrance mingled with the expensive perfume in the air, creating a scent of judgment. Above me, a grand chandelier cast rainbow patterns on the walls of the venue, which had cost me 3 months of my business's profit to rent. I heard my voice, softer than I had intended, say that I just wanted to wish her a happy wedding day and congratulate both of them. Suddenly, her fiancé, Michael, appeared at her side. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, and his smile seemed as cold and sharp as winter. He looked at me and explained that he believed there had been a misunderstanding. I wondered what misunderstanding he could be talking about as I looked from him to my daughter. I searched Emily's face, hoping to find the little girl who had once begged me to push her higher and higher on the swing set. She glanced at the guests who were now watching us, clearly embarrassed. Women in designer gowns were whispering behind their crystal champagne flutes, while men in expensive suits pretended not to be staring as they clearly hung on to our every word. She explained that this was a private family celebration for only the immediate family. Her voice was tight with shame. Her words hit me with the force of ice water. In that single sentence, 28 years of bedtime stories, school plays, and dance recitals simply disappeared. I had sacrificed my own retirement savings for her college fund and chosen her happiness over my own comfort for so long. I quietly told her that I had paid for everything, every flower, every meal, and even the dress she was wearing. Michael's jaw tightened in response, and he told me that money couldn't buy class. I heard Emily whisper that Michael was right without looking me in the eye. She explained that it wasn't about money, it was about fitting in. She told me that I wouldn't understand the kind of people who were at the wedding, but I understood perfectly. The people who built their houses for them weren't invited to their parties. I realized that the man who had given up everything so his daughter could be a part of their world had served his purpose and was no longer needed. All around us, conversations had stopped. A photographer lowered his camera, but the string quartet continued to play, completely unaware of the drama unfolding in front of them. I told her that I understood and placed the gift box on a nearby table between some untouched champagne flutes and white orchids. I explained that I didn't want to embarrass her. She pleaded with me not to make things harder than they needed to be. I took a moment to study her face, memorizing the features I had kissed goodnight for so many years. Her mother's green eyes were now as cold as river stones, and the smile I had worked so many extra hours to put braces on was now turning away from me. I told her quietly that she was right, that I didn't belong there. The walk to the exit felt like a marathon. I could hear the click of designer heels against the marble floors behind me as people started to resume their whispered conversations. I heard someone laugh, the sound high and fake. My work boots, which I had polished just for the occasion, felt heavy against the pristine floor. When I finally stepped outside, the spring air filled my lungs like freedom. The parking lot stretched out in front of me, filled with luxury cars I could never afford. My pickup truck sat alone in the furthest corner, a place where it seemed to belong in their world. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady, despite everything that had just happened. 25 years of building my company from nothing had taught me patience, and 25 years of loving an ungrateful daughter had shown me the true value of loyalty. The screen lit up with missed calls from my lawyer about a property dispute, but I ignored them. I scrolled past the calls to find a number I hadn't dialed in months, but suddenly needed. My thumb hovered over the contact name, which read First National Bank Business Services. I thought about how my daughter was celebrating her new life inside the ballroom, and how I was about to begin my new life without her. The phone rang just once before someone picked it up. The heavy doors to the venue closed behind me, a final sound that felt like a vault ceiling shut. As I walked across the asphalt toward my truck, the sounds of the wedding music faded to whispers. With each step, my pace became more deliberate. I thought about the gift box left behind on their table, abandoned like everything else I had given them. A cool March wind carried the scent of approaching rain, and dark clouds gathered over the venue's Gothic spires. Shadows fell across the luxury cars that cost more than most people's homes. My boots crunched on the gravel as I reached my truck, my keys already in my hand. Inside the cab, silence surrounded me, feeling like a suit of armor. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m., just enough time before the banks closed on Saturday to make a few important calls. I scrolled through my contacts again, stopping when I saw First National Bank Business Services on the screen. I hesitated for just 3 seconds before pressing the call button. A woman named Patricia answered, asking how she could help me. I gave her my name, James Clark, and my account number, 779-4512. I told her I needed to place stop payments on several authorized transactions. She said she would pull up my account and asked for my social security number and my mother's maiden name to verify my identity. As I gave her the information, I watched more guests arrive. Women in silk dresses and men adjusting their expensive cufflinks had no idea what was about to happen. After she verified my information, Patricia informed me that she saw several large transactions from that day and asked which ones I wanted to stop. I listed every wedding-related payment: the venue rental, the catering deposit, the floral arrangements, the photography, and the music services. I told her that I needed it to be immediate. She confirmed that these were significant amounts and asked if I was absolutely certain about stopping all payments. I told her I was completely certain and that there had been a change in circumstances. I could hear the sound of her keyboard as she paused. She then told me that she would need the authorization codes for the transactions over $10,000. I recited the codes from memory. 25 years of running a construction business had taught me to remember every important number, contract detail, and payment authorization. She confirmed that the stop payments were now in effect and that the confirmation numbers were being generated. I told her that was all I needed from the bank side, and I thanked her. My next call was to Spokane's best catering company, the same one that Emily had demanded we hire despite their crazy prices. Marcus, a man from Elegant Affairs Catering, answered the phone. I told him I was calling about the Anderson wedding reception that was currently in progress. He informed me that everything was going beautifully and that the guests were loving the appetizers. I told him there had been a financial complication and that the payment authorization had been revoked. I suggested that he protect his equipment and remaining food service. A moment of silence stretched between us before he asked me what I was saying. I explained that the bank had stopped payment on the contract, effective immediately, and advised him to secure his assets. He hung up without saying another word. A smart man, I thought. The florist answered the phone on the second ring. A woman named Susan from Bellingham Blooms answered. I explained that I was calling about the flowers for the Anderson wedding. She said the arrangements looked stunning and that Emily was pleased with the orchids. I told her there had been a payment issue and that the bank authorization had been canceled. I explained that if she wanted to salvage any value, she would need to collect her arrangements. She asked me how she could collect them when they were part of the entire venue design. I simply told her that business was business and that she should move quickly. 3 more calls followed, each to a different vendor: photography services, the string quartet, and even the linen rental company. Each conversation was exactly the same. Each call started with professional politeness, but then grew into alarm and ended with a rush to hang up as the vendors scrambled to protect their property. My phone showed 4:15 p.m. when I finished my last call. Through the truck's windshield, I saw a white catering van pull up to the venue's service entrance. I assumed it was Marcus, coming to save whatever he could. I imagined Emily inside, still greeting her guests and completely unaware that her perfect wedding was about to become a very expensive lesson. Michael was probably talking business with his father's friends, feeling superior to a simple construction worker like me. I knew that neither of them understood what their actions had really cost them today. I started the engine and slowly pulled out of the parking space, driving past the venue's front entrance. I caught a glimpse of the reception through the tall windows, crystal glasses raised in toasts, and elegant people dancing across the polished floors. All of it was about to change. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, and Emily's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring without answering. At 4:20 p.m., the first truck arrived. It was a white van with Bellingham Blooms, painted in elegant script across the side. Susan was driving with 2 assistants in the passenger seat. They parked near the service entrance and quickly unloaded empty containers with an air of professional efficiency. Through the venue windows, I could see the cocktail reception in full swing. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandeliers as guests mingled around the imported orchids that I had paid for. Michael was gesturing to a circle of men in expensive suits, likely telling them about his latest business idea. Neither the bride nor the groom noticed the florist team entering through the side doors. Emily stood near the main entrance, looking radiant in the $12,000 dress, accepting congratulations from her relatives. Her laugh echoed across the ballroom, bright and carefree. I knew that sound would change soon. I watched as Susan entered the ballroom with 2 large plastic containers. She walked straight to the main altar arrangement, and her assistants flanked her at the smaller displays. Guests began to turn, their celebration now replaced with confusion as the team started taking down the centerpiece. I imagined Emily approaching Susan with a practiced smile, as if she were a manager accustomed to dealing with staff. Emily told Susan that they were in the middle of their reception and that whatever she needed could wait. Susan straightened up, a bundle of white orchids in her hand. She told Emily that she was from Bellingham Blooms and that the payment authorization for the flowers had been canceled about 40 minutes ago. She said she was there to recover her property. Emily's smile flickered but held as she insisted that was impossible because everything had been paid for weeks ago. Susan explained that the account holder, James Clark, had contacted them directly and stopped all the payments. With a professional coldness, she continued to remove the flowers and told Emily that she had written authorization to collect the arrangements. Her assistant began wrapping the altar arrangement in protective plastic. I watched as the color drained from Emily's face. Around them, the guests had stopped talking. I saw Michael stride quickly across the room, his expression shifting from confusion to pure anger. He asked what was happening, his voice full of the authority of someone who was not used to being questioned. Susan replied that there were payment issues and that they were collecting unpaid merchandise. She nodded to her assistants, who started to collect the table centerpieces as the guests watched in stunned silence. The Elegant Affairs catering van pulled up outside just as Susan's team continued their systematic removal of the flowers. This time, Marcus and 3 of his staff members entered through the main doors, their faces grim and without any attempt at discretion. I watched as Emily's perfect composure cracked like fine china as she watched the orchids disappear into containers. I heard her say that there had to be some mistake, that her father wouldn't do this, that he couldn't. Marcus approached her with his clipboard in hand, stating that they needed to stop food service immediately because the payment authorization had been revoked at 4:15. He said they were contractually obligated to protect their equipment and remaining inventory. Michael stepped between Marcus and Emily, his voice growing louder as he insisted that it was his wedding reception and that they couldn't just stop service in the middle of it. Marcus simply stated that they could and that they had to. He explained that when a payment authorization is canceled, the standard procedure requires them to immediately protect their assets. He signaled his team, who began to cover the serving stations with white cloths. The guests shuffled nervously, their champagne glasses untouched in their hands as their conversations devolved into worried whispers. The sharp, intrusive sound of a phone ringing broke through the tense atmosphere. When the equipment coordinator for the string quartet arrived, the music stopped. The microphones went silent, the speakers powered down, and even the ambient lighting shifted as the sound technician disconnected his mixing board. I watched Emily stand frozen in the middle of her collapsing reception, her wedding dress still pristine amid the chaos of disappearing services. I knew she was thinking that this couldn't be happening. Not today, not like this. I saw Michael turn his suspicion and anger from the vendors toward his bride and ask what kind of arrangements her family had made. Her voice cracked with the first hint of genuine panic as she said she didn't know and that everything was supposed to be handled. The venue coordinator appeared with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. She approached Emily with a clear sense of hesitation and told her that she had just spoken with the accounting department and that all the payments for the day's event had come from one account belonging to James Clark. She explained that the account holder had revoked the authorization for every transaction. At that moment, Emily's composure completely shattered. The little girl, who had dismissed me from her own wedding, was finally beginning to understand the extent of my generosity and the bitter consequences of her cruelty. With trembling fingers, she took out her phone and scrolled to a familiar contact. Outside, in the parking lot, my phone started to ring. Emily's name lit up the screen on my dashboard. Through the windshield, I could see her silhouette in the doorway, her phone pressed to her ear with a desperate urgency. I didn't answer. Not yet. 25 years of loving her had led to this very moment. 25 years of believing that sacrifice would build her character instead of destroying it. She was 3 years old when her mother, Sarah, died from cancer after a brutal 6 months. I was left with a toddler who would ask for her mommy every single morning and every single night. I could have remarried quickly to find someone to help me raise her, but I chose to be everything Emily needed myself. When she was 5, curled against my chest in her pink pajamas, she had asked me to read her another story. I had already read her 3 books and had an early morning meeting with potential investors, but her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, were so full of trust. I told her that of course I would, because her daddy always had time for her. That became my motto. I, James Clark, would always have time for Emily and would give her all the money she needed to be happy. When she turned 8, the tuition for her private school took up half of my quarterly profits. As I wrote the checks that meant fewer business expansions and smaller personal budgets for myself, I told myself that it was the best education money could buy. When I told Emily about Riverside Academy, she hugged me and said she would study hard and make me proud. And she did. She got straight A's throughout elementary school, and I sat in the front row of all her school plays, my construction calloused hands applauding louder than anyone else's. Afterward, she would always find me, beaming with accomplishment, and ask if I saw her remember all her lines. She would tell me she was thinking about me the whole time. High school was when everything changed. At Riverside Academy, she was surrounded by wealthy classmates with trust funds and summer homes, and she started to notice the differences. The Sweet 16 party I threw for her cost more than some people's cars, complete with a BMW in the driveway, professional catering, and designer decorations. She complained that everyone else got BMWs and that the Honda I had bought for her was embarrassing. That was in 2015, and it was the first time that money became an expectation instead of something to be appreciated. I should have seen it as a warning sign. The expenses for her college almost bankrupted the business expansion I had been planning. Her dream school, Northwestern University, required sacrifices that went far beyond tuition. Every semester, there were new financial demands, sorority dues, trips to Cancun for spring break, and study abroad programs in Italy. Her phone calls slowly turned into transaction requests, and her visits home were limited to the holidays. When she did call, the conversation lasted just long enough to tell me why she needed money and how quickly she needed it to be transferred to her account. In graduate school, Michael came into her life. He came from old money with family connections, all the things that I could not provide for her despite decades of hard work. At family gatherings, Emily started making comments about my appearance. She suggested that I might want to wear something other than my work boots when I visited because Michael's friends would be there. The woman who had once thanked me for bedtime stories was now embarrassed by the man who had provided her with everything she had ever wanted. My success as a construction worker meant nothing to her new friends. The company that I had built to fund her lifestyle made me an unsuitable person for that lifestyle. Last Christmas, she introduced me to Michael's parents as Emily's father, who owned a small business. A small business. I thought about how 25 years of building Clark Construction from nothing and employing 60 people to support her princess lifestyle had been reduced to a small business. She told me that we needed to talk about the wedding funding and that Michael's family had certain expectations for the ceremony. There was no "thank you for offering to pay" or "we'd be grateful for your help," just the expectation that my life's work was meant to fulfill her social requirements. The wedding planning meetings felt more like business negotiations. Emily brought spreadsheets, and Michael shared his opinions about cost efficiency. Neither of them acknowledged that every line item on the spreadsheet represented months of my labor. The imported flowers, the champagne that cost more per bottle than my workers earned in a day, and the dress that was worth more than most people's monthly rent. She had the nerve to tell me that it wasn't about money, it was about quality. She explained that Michael's family knew quality. It was a quality that my money had bought, but my presence diminished. The very success that enabled them to have their dream wedding made me too ordinary to even attend it. My phone buzzed again. It was Emily's third call in 5 minutes. Through the windows, I could see her pacing back and forth, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. 25 years of sacrifice had brought me to this very moment. Not with a grateful daughter who was celebrating her father's generosity, but with a desperate woman who was finally understanding what she had truly lost. The irony was perfect. The love that had spoiled her was now going to teach her its true value. I reached for my phone, knowing it was time to answer. The engine hummed quietly as I pulled out of the parking lot, Emily's frantic silhouette shrinking in my rearview mirror. Her phone glowed like a beacon in the gathering dusk, and she had called me 7 times in 10 minutes. Each ring felt intentional and controlled, my timing, not hers. The drive home took 20 minutes through Spokane's Saturday evening traffic. For 20 minutes, I watched as my phone lit up with Emily's name, each call more desperate than the last. By the time I got to my driveway, she had left me 4 voicemails. I listened to them while sitting in my garage with the engine turned off. The garage door closed behind me, feeling like a curtain falling on the first act of the day. I listened to her first message, where she said something was wrong with the payments and that it had to be a mistake. She insisted I call her back right away. The second voicemail was more frantic, telling me that this wasn't funny anymore and that the vendors were taking everything. She repeated that people were staring and to just call her back. Her voice cracked in the third message as she told me that she didn't understand what was happening and that Michael's family was asking questions she couldn't answer. In the fourth voicemail, her voice was breaking as she said she needed me and begged me to pick up the phone. As I finished the fourth message, the phone rang again. Emily's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo from her college graduation, the last time she had hugged me without first needing money. I let it ring 4 more times and answered on the 5th. I listened as she yelled, asking what I had done and how I could destroy her wedding. I was glad to hear the pure panic in her voice. It meant she was finally becoming aware. I kept my voice calm and told her I hadn't destroyed anything. I had just stopped paying for things. She insisted I couldn't just stop, that it was her wedding day, and that 60 people were asking why the flowers were gone and why dinner had been stopped. I asked her where she was calling from, and she said they were at a hotel. She explained that the venue coordinator had told them they needed to settle their bills before they could stay. The emptiness in her voice confirmed what she was saying, as did the lack of wedding music in the background. I told her I needed her to listen carefully and asked when the last time she had thanked me for anything was. She asked me why I was giving her a lecture and that she needed me to call the vendors and fix the mess. I ignored her request and repeated my question. The silence that followed felt like forever. I could hear Michael's voice in the background, sharp with frustration. Emily finally replied, saying she didn't remember specific instances, but that I knew she had always been grateful. I told her that I didn't know that. What I did know was that just 3 hours ago, she had told me I didn't belong at her wedding, a wedding I had paid for entirely. She insisted she hadn't meant it like that, and that she was stressed from her wedding day nerves. Her voice changed to the wheedling tone she had perfected in college when she requested money for her spring break trips. She pleaded with me, saying she would make it up to me and that we could talk about everything later, but right now, she needed me to authorize the payments so they could save what was left of the reception. I asked her what was left. She said the cake was still there, some guests remained, and the photographer was waiting to see if we could work something out. I asked her what she planned to use for payment. There was another pause, longer this time. She said she had thought I would handle it, that I always had. I told her that was true and asked if she had any idea how much I had spent on her over the last 25 years. She told me not to make her guess numbers because she was in crisis mode. I told her to just take a guess. She said maybe $50,000. I almost laughed. I told her that $50,000 wouldn't have even covered her sophomore year at Northwestern. I explained that I had spent over $300,000 on her education, housing, transportation, and lifestyle since her mother had died, and that didn't even include what I had spent on the wedding. The line went silent except for the sound of her breathing. She said that couldn't be right. I told her that was a conservative estimate and that I had documentation for every expenditure. She asked me why I was telling her this now. I said it was because she had never asked. I explained that in 25 years, she had never once asked about the cost of her lifestyle or expressed any concern about the burden it placed on me. She said it wasn't a burden because she was my daughter. I told her she was right and that I loved her enough to sacrifice everything for her happiness. I said the question was what she had sacrificed for mine. I heard Michael's voice grow louder in the background. She covered the phone, and I could hear their muffled argument. She uncovered the phone and said that Michael's family was really upset and asking questions about their finances and how they were going to pay for this. I told her that was between her and her husband. She said she didn't have that kind of money and that I knew she didn't. I told her that perhaps it was time for her to learn how to earn it. The silence that followed lasted for nearly 30 seconds. She asked me what I wanted from her. I told her I wanted her to understand what she had thrown away when she dismissed the man who had made her entire lifestyle possible. She said that she understood now and that she was wrong. She asked if we could fix it. I told her we would see. I said I was reviewing our entire financial relationship and that there would be documentation. I told her we would discuss it properly when I was ready. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Through my kitchen window, I could see the lights of Spokane twinkling in the distance. Emily was somewhere out there, facing her first night of financial independence. The education had just begun. The warm light from my desk lamp cast familiar shadows across 25 years of meticulous record-keeping. Filing cabinets lined one wall of my home office like sentinels, guarding secrets Emily had never bothered to ask about. Tonight, those secrets would finally serve their purpose. I sat down with a steaming cup of coffee and opened the first drawer, which was labeled Emily Education 2020. Behind me, the house settled into the quiet of the evening, but my mind was filled with the systematic energy that had built Clark Construction from a small business into an operation with 60 employees. I knew this wasn't revenge, it was an audit. I opened the first folder, Riverside Academy, which contained 12 years of private school tuition. Each payment was documented with bank transfers and semester reports. The numbers were sobering. $8,000 a year in 2008, which climbed to $12,000 by the time she graduated. That was $126,000 for elementary and high school education alone. I created a new spreadsheet and began typing. The columns were labeled date, description, amount, category, and running total. 25 years of fatherhood had been reduced to data points and formulas. The Northwestern University folder was next. It was thicker than the others, bulging with dormitory contracts, meal plan agreements, study abroad fees, and tuition bills. The tuition alone was $52,000 per year for 4 years, and room and board was another $15,000 annually. Her spring break trip to Cancun during her junior year had cost $3,500, and the summer she spent in Italy during her art history phase had cost $8,200. I remembered her telling me that the trip to Italy was essential for her education and that it was how people in her program networked. Page by page, receipt by receipt, the numbers climbed. The total for Northwestern was $284,000. 4 years of college had cost more than what most people earned in 5 years of work. The transportation folder revealed its own patterns. Her first car at 16 was a reliable Honda Civic for $18,000. Within 6 months, she had complained that everyone else drove BMWs. Her second car at 19 was a BMW 320i for $28,000. Her third car at 25 was a BMW X3 because Michael's friends drove luxury SUVs. Each car came with insurance premiums, maintenance costs, and registration fees that she had never seen. These were hidden expenses that a good father absorbed without comment. My phone buzzed, and Emily's name appeared on the screen again. I let it ring as I added another entry to my spreadsheet. iPhone 14 Pro Max, $1,200. The technology and living expenses folder contained the darkest surprises. I had paid for her post-graduation apartment in Lincoln Park for 3 years at $2,800 a month. I had also paid for her credit card bills when her spending went over the generous allowance I provided. It averaged out to about $100 a month for 2 years for things like designer clothes, spa treatments, and vacation trips with friends whose parents also funded their lifestyles. The totals grew like compound interest. Education was $410,000. Transportation was $75,000. Housing was $125,000. Personal expenses were $180,000. And the wedding was $147,000. My calculator showed a total of $937,000. Nearly $1 million had been spent on her over 25 years. Each expense seemed reasonable by itself. The private school was an investment in her future, College opened doors. A reliable car ensured her safety. Nice clothes built her confidence. And the wedding was a celebration of her love. But the pattern told a different story. Emily had never contributed a single dollar to her own support. She had never held a job for longer than 6 months and had never expressed concern about the costs or gratitude for my sacrifices. I opened the photo albums I had maintained throughout her childhood. I saw a picture of Emily at 8 years old, with her toothy smile and a glow on her face after her first school play. I remembered her thanking me for coming and asking if I had heard how loud everyone clapped. There was another photo of her at 12, triumphant after winning a spelling bee. I remembered her telling me that when she was nervous, she would think about me, and it would help her remember the words. When had she stopped seeing me as a person worth thanking? When had I become simply a source of funding for her ambitions? My phone rang again. It was her 14th call since our conversation had ended. This time, she left a voicemail. She pleaded with me to answer and said she had been thinking about what I said. She admitted that she knew she hadn't been grateful enough and that she had taken me for granted. She said that Michael's family was threatening to leave if they couldn't explain the financial situation and asked me what I wanted from her. I thought about how what I wanted was 25 years of appreciation that would never come. What I needed was for her to understand the value of what she had so casually dismissed. I printed the spreadsheet summary and organized the supporting documents into manila folders, labeling them education, transportation, housing, personal expenses, and wedding costs. Each folder was thick with evidence of love that had been translated into dollars and sacrifice that had been measured in bank transfers. I knew that tomorrow would bring a conversation that Emily wasn't prepared for, questions about responsibility, accountability, and the true cost of entitlement. Tonight was for preparation. The documentation was spread across my desk like evidence in a courtroom case. Nearly $1 million of support had been provided without question, appreciation, or acknowledgement. Emily had lived like royalty while treating her benefactor like hired help. That arrangement was about to change. My phone buzzed once more with Emily's name. I reached for it, but stopped myself. Not yet. I would let her understand what helplessness felt like. I would let her taste the panic of financial dependence without guarantees. The education would continue in the morning. Sunday morning brought crisp March air and the kind of clarity that comes from being thoroughly prepared. My briefcase sat by the front door, loaded with 25 years of documented evidence. Richards and Associates had agreed to an emergency consultation for 9 a.m., a professional courtesy between businessmen who understood that some situations couldn't wait until Monday. The law office felt appropriately serious with its mahogany panels, legal volumes lining the walls, and certificates documenting decades of successful practice. Margaret Richards herself met me in the conference room. Her silver hair and sharp suit gave off the competence I needed. She told me that she had reviewed my preliminary documentation and that my level of record-keeping was exceptional. She spread my folders across the polished table, scanning the financial summaries with practiced efficiency. She noted that the total amount involved, nearly $1 million over 25 years, was substantial, even by their standards. I told her that I wanted this handled professionally with no emotion, just business. I wanted Emily to understand the financial reality of what she had taken for granted. Margaret nodded and made notes on a yellow legal pad. She explained that the documentation supported either gift reclassification or promissory note establishment. Given her pattern of escalating demands without any reciprocal responsibility, she said we had multiple recovery options. She outlined the strategy with surgical precision. A formal demand letter requesting full repayment within 30 days, a detailed accounting of all expenditures with supporting evidence, a clear timeline for response and negotiation, and professional consequences for noncompliance. She said that this approach would transform a family dispute into a business transaction, which would be much cleaner for everyone involved. By 11 a.m., the documents were prepared with an official letterhead, formal language, and serious implications. The demand was simple: $937,000 in repayment within 30 days, or legal proceedings would begin. Margaret told me that they would arrange for courier delivery that afternoon with a required signature to create an official record of receipt. I drove home with copies of everything, a mix of satisfaction and sadness for the necessity of such measures. I knew Emily had created this situation herself through years of entitlement. and I was simply providing the consequences she had never faced. At exactly 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was the courier service, confirming that the delivery had been made to the Spokane Grand Hotel, room 1247. The receipt had been signed by Emily Clark Anderson. The formal process had begun. I imagined Emily's confusion when the hotel desk called about a legal delivery and her assumption that it was related to paperwork for the vendors. I pictured Michael taking charge with his typical arrogance, breaking the official seal, and then slowly comprehending what he was reading. The phone began ringing at 2:47 p.m. Emily's name flashed repeatedly on my screen. I let each call go to voicemail, and each message was more desperate than the last. In the first message, she asked what the legal document was and insisted that it couldn't be serious. In the second, she said that $900,000 was impossible and that I had never said these were loans. In the third, she begged me to call her back, saying that Michael's family was asking questions she couldn't answer. In the fourth, her voice broke as she said she didn't understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I knew that at the Grand Hotel, Emily and Michael were discovering what accountability looked like when it was backed by legal authority. 25 years of gifts had been reclassified as a recoverable debt. Their financial dependency was now documented, quantified, and subject to collection procedures. The wedding disaster had been the opening act. This was the main performance. Margaret had explained the process clearly. Civil debt recovery follows standard procedures. They would need legal representation to respond properly, which would cost them money they didn't have for a debt they couldn't pay. Emily's frantic calls continued through the afternoon. She had 15 missed calls and 8 voicemails. Each message revealed a deeper understanding of her helplessness. The woman who had dismissed me from her wedding was beginning to comprehend what she had actually dismissed. The irony was perfect. She had spent 25 years taking my financial support for granted, and now she was facing 30 days to repay it all with professional consequences for failure. My phone buzzed again with her name for the 16th time. I decided to answer. I heard the exhaustion in her voice as she said that we needed to talk about it reasonably. She told me that the legal document couldn't be real. I sat down in my kitchen chair with my coffee. Through the window, the peaceful Sunday afternoon in Spokane looked calm. Families were walking dogs and children were riding bicycles. They were normal people living normal lives. I told Emily that the document was completely real, as were the 29 days she had to respond. She said that $900,000 was impossible and that I had never said any of it was a loan. I told her that I had never said it was a gift either and that she had simply assumed. In the background, I could hear Michael's frustrated voice and the rustling of paper, as if someone were pacing. I told her I needed to understand something and kept my voice even. I asked her who she planned to contact for help with this situation. Silence stretched between us. She finally said she would reach out to family, friends, and people who cared about her. I told her I understood and that she had 29 days remaining and suggested she start making those calls. I ended the conversation and turned my phone to silent. I wanted Emily to find out what I already knew, that nearly $1 million in debt would reveal exactly who was willing to help and who would politely decline. My phone lit up repeatedly throughout the afternoon with Emily's name flashing on the screen like a distress signal. I let each call go unanswered and each voicemail unheard. By evening, the calls had stopped. Monday morning brought a different kind of silence. There were no frantic messages from Emily and no desperate voicemails. It was an unusual quiet that made me check my phone twice to ensure it was working. I drove to a construction site where we were breaking ground on a new office complex. Physical work always helped me think clearly. The sound of the machinery, the smell of fresh earth, and the satisfaction of building something solid and permanent. My foreman, Dave, approached me around 10 a.m. and told me I seemed different today and asked if everything was okay. I told him it was a family situation and that sometimes you had to make hard decisions for people's own good. He asked if it was my kids. My phone buzzed with a text message from Emily. She said she had been trying to reach her family and friends, and that everyone was shocked by the amount of money. She asked me to please call her. I deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived an hour later. She said that Aunt Margaret told her she couldn't get involved and that she thought Emily should learn responsibility. She asked what that even meant. Another text followed, saying that her friend Sarah wouldn't take her calls anymore and that her friend Lisa was asking questions about why she had never worked. The messages continued through the afternoon, each one revealing Emily's growing isolation. Her college roommate was uncomfortable with the conversation, her sorority sisters were surprised by the financial details, and her few remaining friends were unable to help with such a large amount of money. Michael was having his own problems. His mother had apparently called 3 times demanding explanations. His father wanted a family meeting about reputation management, and his brother was asking pointed questions about financial disclosure before the marriage. By Tuesday, the pattern was clear. Emily's support network was collapsing under the weight of nearly $1 million in debt. People who had enjoyed her generous, expensive gifts were suddenly unavailable when she needed financial assistance. Wednesday brought a different message. She said that Michael's family was pressuring him to consider an annulment because they thought their marriage was based on financial deception. She asked me to please call her so we could work it out. I almost smiled. Michael's family was apparently faster at recognizing reality than their son had been. Thursday's message was shorter. She said that nobody would help, that everyone had excuses, that Michael was barely speaking to her, and that his parents wanted him to see a lawyer about protecting his assets. She said she didn't understand how everything had changed so fast. 25 days had remained. Emily was learning what financial independence actually meant when you had never developed the skills to achieve it. The education was proceeding exactly as planned. Friday morning's silence felt different. There were no text messages or desperate voicemails from Emily. It was an unusual quiet that made me check my phone twice to ensure it was working properly. Then the attack began. On Monday, my assistant, Rachel, knocked on my office door around 9 a.m. holding a printed email with an obvious look of concern on her face. She told me that she had received an inquiry from the Spokane Business Journal asking about family troubles that were affecting my business operations. I read the email twice. The professional language masked pointed questions about my stability and my treatment of family members. I asked her if she had any idea how they heard about this. She then handed me her tablet, which showed a Facebook post with over 200 shares. It was a photo of Emily on her wedding day, beautiful and radiant, followed by an emotional text that described me as a heartless father who had destroyed her special day and was now demanding impossible financial payments as punishment. The post painted me as an unstable man who was taking revenge on his daughter for perceived slights. Hundreds of comments expressed shock and sympathy, several of which tagged local business owners I had worked with for decades. My phone rang, and Bob Martinez from Martinez Concrete, a 20-year business partner, asked about the concerning things he was seeing online. I told him there was documentation that told a very different story. He said he hoped so because some people were already asking questions about my contracts with the city. 3 more calls followed within an hour, all expressing concern and all asking careful questions about my mental state and business decisions. I realized Emily and Michael had been busy. I found Michael's strategy easily enough. His family name opened doors in Spokane's social circles, and their connections reached country clubs, charity boards, and professional organizations where reputation mattered. They were using those connections to spread Emily's narrative of victimhood. Local Facebook groups buzzed with secondhand versions of the story. Construction company owner demands $450,000 from daughter after ruining her wedding, and Spokane businessman sued own child for wedding expenses. Each retelling grew more dramatic and more damaging. By noon, I had received 7 business-related calls expressing concern. The Spokane Rotary Club president wondered about my state of mind regarding upcoming community projects, and 3 separate contractors mentioned hearing things that might affect our working relationships. Emily and Michael had chosen their battlefield carefully. In a city like Spokane, reputation was currency. Destroying someone's standing in the business community meant destroying their livelihood. They had miscalculated one crucial factor. I drove home and pulled out the documentation that Margaret Richards had helped me organize. 25 years of financial records, categorized and summarized. Every check, every payment, every expense Emily had never asked about or appreciated. Then I made my own calls. I contacted Margaret and told her I needed to schedule a press conference for the next morning. She asked if I was certain, telling me that once the information was public, there would be no taking it back. I told her that Emily and Michael had already made it public and that now it was time for the truth. The next 6 hours were methodical preparation. I contacted the Spokane Business Journal directly, offering them complete financial transparency. I called the 3 reporters Emily's campaign had reached, promising documented evidence that would tell the real story. Most importantly, I contacted my business partners of 25 years, community leaders, and professional associates. They were the people who had watched me build Clark Construction from nothing, people who had seen my dedication to both business and family over decades. I called everyone on our contractor list and told them there would be a story tomorrow that would set the record straight about Emily's situation. By evening, I had a confirmation that the Spokane Business Journal would run a feature story and local news stations agreed to cover the press conference. The documentation was copied and ready for distribution. Emily's attack had lasted 3 days. My response would last one morning. The truth, properly documented and professionally presented, would speak louder than social media manipulation and emotional appeals. 24 days remained on the legal deadline. By tomorrow afternoon, Emily would understand that destroying reputations was a game best played by people with actual substance to defend. Tuesday morning arrived with the precision of a construction schedule. At exactly 9 a.m., I published 25 years of financial documentation across every platform Emily and Michael had contaminated with their lies. The presentation was methodical, professional, and undeniable. Bank statements showing $937,000 in payments over 25 years, categorized spreadsheets breaking down education costs, transportation expenses, housing support, and lifestyle funding, and photographs of Emily at every stage of her pampered life. Each image was matched to corresponding financial support. The headline I had chosen was 25 Years of Parental Support Documented. Below it, a comprehensive timeline showed Emily's progression from a grateful child to an entitled adult, with every dollar spent, documented, and verified. The response was immediate. Within an hour, my phone started ringing with different voices, not concerned this time, but supportive. "James, I had no idea about the scope of the support you provided," said Tom Bradley from Bradley Electrical. "My kids are in college, and I'm spending maybe $15,000 a year total. You spent that much every semester." Bob Martinez called back and told me he owed me an apology and that after seeing the bank records, he understood exactly what I was dealing with. He said that level of entitlement would break any parent. The social media momentum shifted like an avalanche in reverse. Comments that had supported Emily's victim narrative suddenly looked naive against the backdrop of financial reality. Screenshots of bank statements showing the $52,000 annual college tuition payments and receipts for 3 different luxury cars. 28 years of housing, clothing, and lifestyle expenses that most families would consider impossible to afford. Margaret Richards called at 11 a.m. and told me that the response had been extraordinary. She said the Spokane Business Journal wanted to run a feature story about financial responsibility and entitlement, and that I had managed to turn a reputation attack into a community education moment. By noon, Emily's original Facebook post looked pathetic against the mountain of evidence I had provided. People were sharing my documentation with comments like, "This is what real parental sacrifice looks like, and no wonder he's seeking repayment. This level of support is a full-time job." The Spokane construction community rallied completely. Contractors who had questioned my stability were now sharing stories about my work ethic and integrity. The Rotary Club president issued a public statement supporting my position. Even the mayor's office released a comment about the importance of financial responsibility in family relationships. Dave texted me from the construction site and told me that the crew was talking about my situation and that everyone was behind me and couldn't believe what Emily had put me through. Local news stations picked up the story as a human interest piece about parental sacrifice and accountability. The documented evidence made their job easy. They simply had to present the facts and let viewers draw their own conclusions. Emily's attack had backfired spectacularly. Her portrayal of victimhood couldn't survive contact with 25 years of documented financial reality. The community that had briefly questioned my stability was now questioning hers. Michael's family connections worked against them now. Their social circle was seeing exactly what kind of people they had welcomed into their network. Anderson family credibility was being used to spread lies about a respected businessman who had simply documented the truth. By evening, the narrative had completely reversed. Emily and Michael weren't victims of a cruel father. They were entitled individuals who had attacked a generous parent when he finally set boundaries. The documentation told a story that emotional manipulation couldn't counter. Every bank statement was a chapter in 25 years of sacrifice. Every receipt was evidence of love that had been taken for granted. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. She asked me to please take down the financial records because people were saying terrible things about them. I deleted the message without responding. 23 days remained. The education was nearly complete. Michael's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Wednesday morning, jolting both of them from uneasy sleep. The hotel room felt smaller with each passing hour, filled with the weight of social media catastrophe and mounting financial pressure. "Michael, this is your father." The voice carried through the phone speaker with unmistakable authority. "We need to talk immediately." Emily watched Michael's face drain of color as he listened to demands she couldn't quite hear. His responses were clipped and defensive. "Yes, I understand the implications." "No, I didn't know about the extent of the documentation. The situation is more complicated than we anticipated." The conversation lasted 12 minutes. When Michael hung up, he stared at the phone for a long moment before speaking. "My family wants me home today." "Home? Michael, this is temporary. My father will calm down once." "Emily, stop." His voice carried a finality she had never heard before. "My father received calls yesterday from 3 different business partners asking about our family troubles. The country club is buzzing with gossip about the Anderson family's association with financial fraud." "Financial fraud? That's ridiculous. This is a family dispute that got out of hand." Michael began pulling clothes from drawers, shoving them into his suitcase with sharp, angry movements. "Your father published bank records showing nearly $1 million in support you never acknowledged. To my family's social circle, that looks like deception at best and manipulation at worst." Emily felt panic rising in her chest like ice water. "You're leaving? We just got married 6 days ago. 6 days that have destroyed my professional reputation and my family's standing in the community." Michael's packing grew more aggressive. "I have a trust fund, Emily. Business prospects, a future that depends on maintaining certain relationships." "What about our relationship? What about our marriage vows?" Michael stopped packing and looked at her directly for the first time since the phone call. "What marriage? You brought me into a financial disaster without warning. Your father is demanding almost $1 million in repayment, and you have no way to pay it. My family lawyer says I need to protect myself from potential liability." "Liability? I'm your wife. You're a financial burden with no assets and massive debt." The words hit Emily like physical blows. "My family cannot afford to be associated with this level of scandal." Emily's phone, silent for days, suddenly buzzed with a text from Michael's mother. "Emily, dear, Michael needs to come home. Family obligations, you understand?" The politeness made it worse somehow. Even Michael's mother, who had praised Emily's grace and beauty at the wedding, was cutting ties with surgical precision. "Michael, please. We can work through this together. My father is angry, but he loves me. This will blow over." "Emily, look around." Michael gestured at her laptop, still open to the devastating social media comments. "This isn't blowing over. Your father published financial records going back 25 years. People are calling you a trust fund baby who never worked a day in her life." They're right. The accusation stung because it was accurate. Emily had never held a job longer than 6 months. She had never contributed financially to her own support. She had never questioned where her comfortable lifestyle had come from. "I was being a daughter." Daughters are supposed to be supported by their fathers. Not to the tune of nearly $1 million over 25 years without any gratitude or reciprocation. Michael zipped his suitcase closed. "My family runs in circles where people contribute to society. They build businesses, support charities, and create value. What have you ever created besides expenses?" Emily felt something breaking inside her chest. Not just her marriage, but her understanding of herself and her place in the world. "Where will I go? I don't have money for the hotel. My credit cards are maxed. Everyone has stopped talking to me." Michael paused at the door with his hand on the handle. "Call your father. Apologize. Accept responsibility. Maybe he'll help you figure out how to become an actual adult." "Michael, please don't leave me alone." "Emily, I've been alone in this marriage since it started. You never contributed anything except expectations and expenses." His voice softened slightly. "Maybe losing everything will teach you something. Your father's money never could." The door closed behind him with devastating finality. Emily stared at the hotel room, that suddenly felt vast and empty. Her wedding dress still hung in the closet, a reminder of 6 days that had destroyed her entire life. No husband, no family support, no friends, no money. For the first time in 28 years, Emily Clark Anderson was completely alone. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't called since that first desperate Saturday. Her father's contact information appeared on the screen like a lifeline she wasn't sure she deserved to grasp. 22 days remaining to find almost $1 million she didn't have, to rebuild relationships she'd destroyed, and to become someone she'd never been before. The phone rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Emily." His voice carried none of the warmth she'd grown up with, but no cruelty either, just calm acknowledgement that his daughter was finally calling after losing everything. "Dad." The word came out broken, barely above a whisper. I don't know where to start." "Start with the truth. Do you understand what happened this week?" She stared at the hotel room around her, at Michael's absence, at her laptop screen still showing hundreds of comments condemning her behavior. The weight of 28 years of thoughtless entitlement crashed down like a collapsed building. "I lost everything. My husband left me this morning. His family cut me off completely. I don't have money for tonight's hotel bill." Her voice cracked. "Everyone hates me. Do you understand why?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For 28 years, she had blamed others for her problems, made excuses, and found someone else responsible for every consequence. "Not this time. Because I treated you like a bank account instead of a person. Because I never appreciated what you sacrificed for me. Because I was selfish and entitled and cruel." Silence stretched between them. She could hear him breathing, considering her words. "Go on. I saw the financial records you published. $900,000 over 25 years. I never asked where the money came from. Never thanked you properly. Never thought about what you were giving up to provide for me." Tears came freely now, the first genuine tears she had cried since this all began. "I dismissed you from my own wedding, a wedding you paid for entirely. What else? I tried to destroy your reputation when you stood up to me. I lied about you on social media. I got Michael's family to spread rumors about your character. The admissions felt like removing poison from an infected wound. I became everything that's wrong with spoiled children who never grow up." "Emily," his voice softened slightly. "Do you remember when you were 8, after your mother died? You hugged me every night and told me I was the best daddy in the world. I remember. I wanted to give you everything because I loved you. But somewhere along the way, giving you everything became the reason you stopped loving me back." "I never stopped loving you, Dad. I stopped showing it. I stopped being grateful. I stopped being a daughter and became a consumer. What do you want from me now?" The question terrified her because she understood it wasn't just about immediate help. It was about what kind of relationship they could have going forward. "I want to earn your respect. I want to become the daughter you deserve to have. I want to learn how to be an adult who contributes instead of just taking." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But first, I need help surviving long enough to prove I can change." "What kind of help?" "I need enough money to stay in the hotel for 1 more week while I find a job. Any job. I need a chance to prove I can support myself." "Emily, if I help you this time, there will be conditions. Anything. You'll find employment within 2 weeks. I don't care if it's cleaning offices or waiting tables. Pride is a luxury you can no longer afford." "I understand. No financial requests for 6 months. You prove you can live on what you earn." "Yes. We'll talk once a week, but our conversations will be between 2 adults, not between a parent and a dependent child. I want that. I want to earn the right to be your daughter again." "Emily, I'm going to transfer $1,000 to your account. That covers this hotel for 1 week and basic groceries. After that, you're on your own." "Dad, thank you. I know I don't deserve." "You're right. You don't deserve it, but everyone deserves one chance to grow up, even at 28. His voice carried both sternness and hope. "Emily, I've always loved you. Now I want to see if I can respect you, too. I won't let you down. Not again. We'll see. Love you, sweetheart." The call ended, but for the first time in a week, she felt something other than despair. Not relief exactly, but possibility. The chance to become someone worth respecting. 21 days to prove she could change, and a lifetime to earn back what she'd thrown away. She opened her laptop and started searching for jobs in Spokane. Every entry-level position looked intimidating to someone who had never really worked, But intimidating was better than impossible. For the first time in her life, she was going to earn something herself. The education was finally beginning. 1 week later, Emily stood on the corner of Division and Mission, clutching a paper bag with a single, lukewarm coffee and a bagel. Her feet ached inside the cheap flats she had bought, a replacement for the designer shoes she had left at the hotel. She had applied to 34 jobs in 5 days. The rejections were polite but firm, often citing her lack of long-term work experience and the public scandal that had not faded from local news. The $1,000 her father had transferred was dwindling fast. The hotel room was gone, and she had moved into a small, sparsely furnished room she had found on Craigslist. It was the first time she had ever lived with strangers, and the noise from the street outside her window kept her awake at night. Emily landed her first job at a family-owned diner called The Daily Grind. She was a waitress, and the owner, a gruff but kind man named Gus, gave her a chance after a lengthy, uncomfortable conversation about the Clark family scandal. She was clumsy at first, spilling coffee and dropping plates. But she was a quick learner, and she quickly began to excel at her job. Her father's weekly calls became a lifeline. They would talk about her work, and he would offer her advice about how to handle difficult customers. He would ask her about her hours and how much she was earning. He never once mentioned the money she owed him, and he never offered to help her with her expenses. Their conversations were about her new life as a working adult. For the first time, she felt like her father was listening to her instead of judging her, and she found herself opening up to him about her fears and her struggles. She was learning to respect herself for the small things, for the first paycheck she earned, for the blisters on her feet, and for the way she could handle a busy Saturday rush at the diner. The $937,000 debt was always at the back of her mind, but it no longer felt like a crushing burden. It was a reminder of what she had been and a motivator for the person she was becoming. 6 months later, Emily sat in her father's home office. He had invited her over for the first time since their phone call, a small, yet significant gesture. She looked at the filing cabinets that lined his office, no longer with a sense of resentment, but with a new understanding of the sacrifices they represented. He held up a copy of her 6-month bank statement. She had paid her rent, bills, and groceries. She had even managed to save a little money. "You've proven you can live on your own," he said, his voice carrying a hint of pride. "You've also proven that I can be a father to you without paying for your entire life." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad, for everything. For the lesson, for the support, for the second chance." "You earned it, Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You've come a long way. So what's next?" "I want to start paying you back," she said, her voice clear and determined. He smiled and shook his head. "We can talk about that someday, but not today. You've already given me what I wanted most. My daughter back." He stood up and walked around his desk to hug her, and she felt the warmth of his embrace. It was the first time he had hugged her in a long time. She knew that the hugs from her father were worth more than all the money in the world. The education was complete.